You are listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture and all things related to it. New episodes are released daily. For more information, check out glossahouse.com and subscribe to our channels on Spotify and YouTube. Welcome and enjoy.
Shalom, my name is Dr. Jennifer Noonan, and I want to welcome you to another episode of SLA Insights. In today's episode, I'm going to be wrapping up a discussion of factors that affect vocabulary acquisition and retention. I've covered 4 principles in previous episodes, and today I'm going to cover the last one. The factors that I've talked about that can affect vocabulary learning and retention, and these in a positive way. The ones I've covered so far have been motivation, noticing, retrieval, and creative use. And an increase in any of those 4 is likely to increase the likelihood of acquisition and retention of vocabulary items. Today's topic is interference, and interference is actually going to be a negative factor and impede the process of learning and retaining vocabulary. So for this one, you want to remove interference if you want to increase vocabulary learning and retention. So the issue here with interference is that learning certain words together at the same time can interfere with the acquisition of some of the vocabulary words. So for example, learning near synonyms or opposites, antonyms, at the same time can have a negative effect on learning and retrieval. Now, if you're like me, the instinct has been, and for me it was until I started reading the research, that, it's a great idea to learn semantic categories together, learn the animals together, learn plants together, learn occupations together, learn body parts together. And the research seems to indicate that that's not the case. One caveat, though, is we're talking early exposure to these words. In an initial meeting, the first 3, 4, 5, maybe even 10 times, you don't want this interference. However, later on, after multiple exposures and when the students have a fairly good grasp of the vocabulary items in question, at that point, then yes, I think it would be okay to bring in a collection, say, of animals and start doing a little compare and contrast, add some nuance, help them understand that the difference between some of the words for cow, for example, that could be helpful, but not at first. At first, if you start introducing these synonyms or words in the same lexical set, then you're going to be interfering with the fragile memory traces that are being put down at the time. And because these words can be easily confused, it causes interference. So there are a few categories of words that you don't want to teach together, again, at least in the first few meetings with these words. Near synonyms, near synonyms, opposites, antonyms, these can be easily confused, and you don't want to be teaching them first thing right off the bat together. Teach them independently, and only later, as you deepen their understanding of the vocabulary, can you bring them together and start comparing and contrasting. Another thing to avoid introducing at the same time are, as I said earlier, members of the same lexical set. And we're talking body parts, animals, plants. Avoid teaching these at the same time, again, because they will interfere with each other as the learner tries to remember and lay down some initial memory traces for these items. One caveat, though, is that learning words in thematic groups, not semantic groups, but thematic groups, can actually facilitate learning. So, for example, you could teach together words around a similar theme, such as the temple, like sacrifice, priest, holy. Those words are not synonyms, they're not near synonyms, and they're not in the same semantic groups. But because they work together, they're in the same theme, they can be taught together, and they actually can improve learning of these vocabulary items. Another example might be words related to farming, like seed, plow, grow. And again, these are not synonyms, they're not in the same semantic categories, but they're related to each other, centered around the same theme that can actually help in the learning of those words. So, by implication then, a few suggestions for how to teach vocabulary, and in this case, how not to teach it, is really to avoid teaching together, especially at the initial meeting, these words that might cause interference. And these would be, again, synonyms, things like great and large, or people and nation. Try not to teach them together at the same time. Antonyms, things like big versus little, hot versus cold, good versus evil. Don't teach those together at the same time. Again, later, yes, for review, maybe, but not in the initial meetings with those words. And then also you want to avoid teaching together words that are in the same semantic group. Things like body parts, like plants, like gemstones. Teach those individually at first, and then later, if you want to do a review, get out your picture of the body and have them label the body. That's great, but not at the initial meeting. However, you can feel free to teach and might be encouraged to teach using thematic groups. I gave the example of the temple or farming. You might also think army and warfare, some things like that. Thematic groups, vocabulary surrounding a particular idea, can be taught together as long as you're not teaching synonyms or things in the same semantic group. So I hope that gives you some ideas for how to go about teaching or not teaching vocabulary. And again, this now wraps up this section on factors that are going to influence vocabulary learning and retention. I covered 4 positive ones prior to this in previous episodes, and today the one negative, that is interference, that are going to affect how students how quickly and efficiently and deeply they learn and retrieve those vocabulary words. Now, in future episodes, I'm going to start talking about some general implications for vocabulary instruction, big picture, what this might mean, taking together all these factors that we've discussed. What would it look like, big picture, to teach vocabulary? And then from there, move into some specific practical activities that will help vocabulary learning. So I hope you can join me for these upcoming episodes. In the meantime, have a great week.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.